The allure of the East Indies, with its promise of exotic spices and untold riches, had captivated European powers for centuries. It was the lure of nutmeg, cloves, and pepper that first drew Dutch traders to Indonesia's shores in the late 16th century. These early voyages were fraught with danger and uncertainty. Yet, the potential rewards proved too tempting to resist. The Dutch, eager to break into the lucrative spice trade, saw an opportunity in the fragmented archipelago. These early interactions were primarily commercial. The Dutch sought to establish trading posts and secure access to the coveted spices. However, the seeds of a more dominant relationship were sown. The Dutch, with their superior naval technology and growing ambitions, were poised to play a more assertive role in the region's affairs. In 1602, a pivotal moment arrived with the formation of the Dutch East India Company, or VOC. This powerful entity was granted a trade monopoly by the Dutch government. This gave the VOC unprecedented power and influence. The VOC was not just a trading company, it was a force to be reckoned with. The VOC established fortified trading posts and gradually expanded its control over key spice-producing islands. They employed a combination of diplomacy, coercion, and military might to achieve their goals. Local rulers who resisted were often subdued through force, while others were co-opted through alliances and treaties. The company's impact was profound. It transformed the economic landscape of the archipelago. The VOC's focus on maximizing profits led to the exploitation of resources and the displacement of local populations. The company's dominance reshaped the political dynamics of the region, paving the way for centuries of colonial rule. Over the 17th and 18th centuries, the VOC's role evolved from a primarily commercial entity to a dominant political power. The lines between trade and territorial control blurred as the company asserted its authority over larger areas of the archipelago. This transition was driven by several factors. The Dutch faced competition from other European powers, forcing them to consolidate their hold on the region. Internal conflicts among indigenous rulers provided opportunities for the VOC to intervene and expand its influence. The company's growing military strength and administrative capacity enabled it to exert control over vast areas. This marked a significant shift in the Dutch presence in Indonesia. No longer content with mere trading posts, the Dutch were establishing a colonial empire. This expansion would have far-reaching consequences for both Indonesia and the Netherlands. By the 19th century, the VOC had given way to the Dutch East Indies, a formal colony under the direct rule of the Dutch government. The archipelago was integrated into the global capitalist system, with its economy geared towards serving the interests of the colonial power. The Dutch introduced cash crops such as coffee, sugar, and indigo, transforming the agricultural landscape. Large plantations were established, often relying on forced labor and exploitative practices. The colonial administration imposed taxes and regulations that benefited Dutch businesses and traders. This economic system led to the enrichment of the Netherlands and the impoverishment of many Indonesians. Raw materials flowed out of the colony while manufactured goods flowed in, stifling local industries and creating dependency. Section 5. The Java War resistance against the colonizers. Dutch colonial rule was not without its challenges. Resistance to Dutch authority simmered throughout the archipelago, often erupting into open rebellion. One of the most significant uprisings was the Java War, a protracted and bloody conflict that lasted from 1825 to 1830. This war was sparked by a complex interplay of factors, including resentment over Dutch economic exploitation, religious tensions, and the ambitions of local rulers. At the heart of the rebellion was Prince Diponegoro, a charismatic Javanese prince who became a symbol of resistance. Diponegoro skillfully mobilized Javanese peasants and nobles alike, posing a formidable challenge to Dutch authority. The Java War had a profound impact on both sides. It demonstrated the limits of Dutch military power and highlighted the deep-seated resentment against colonial rule. Section 6. Ethical policy and its discontents. A turning point? The Java War forced the Dutch to re-evaluate their approach to colonial governance. The brutality of the conflict and the growing criticism of colonial exploitation led to the adoption of the so-called ethical policy in the early 20th century. This policy aimed to improve the living conditions of Indonesians through education, healthcare, and economic development. However, the ethical policy was often criticized as being too little, too late. It failed to address the fundamental injustices of colonial rule and did little to transfer real power to the Indonesian people. In many ways, it was a case of too little, too late. The policy did, however, have some unintended consequences. By promoting education and fostering a sense of Indonesian identity, it inadvertently contributed to the rise of nationalist sentiment. Section 7. The rise of Indonesian nationalism, seeds of dissent. The 20th century witnessed the emergence of a powerful nationalist movement in Indonesia. This movement was fueled by a growing awareness of shared identity among the diverse peoples of the archipelago. The Dutch policy of promoting education intended to create a more compliant population backfired spectacularly. Education provided the tools for Indonesians to articulate their grievances and organize for change. Nationalist organizations emerged, advocating for greater autonomy and eventually complete independence. These early nationalists drew inspiration from a variety of sources, including Western ideals of self-determination, traditional Javanese notions of kingship, and Islamic teachings on justice and equality. Sukarno and the nationalist movement, a leader emerges. Among the leaders who emerged from the Indonesian nationalist movement, Sukarno stood out for his charisma, oratory skills, and unwavering commitment to independence. Sukarno articulated a vision of an independent Indonesia free from colonial rule. He skillfully navigated the complex political landscape, mobilizing support from various segments of Indonesian society. His message resonated with millions who yearned for freedom and self-determination. Sukarno's leadership proved instrumental in galvanizing the Indonesian people and steering the independence movement towards its ultimate goal. The Japanese occupation, a catalyst for change. The outbreak of World War II and the subsequent Japanese occupation of Indonesia from 1942 to 1945 proved to be a pivotal turning point. The Japanese, eager to secure Indonesian resources and support for their war effort, sought to undermine Dutch authority. They co-opted Indonesian nationalists, offering them positions of power and promoting the idea of an independent Indonesia. While the Japanese occupation was undeniably brutal, it had the unintended consequence of weakening Dutch colonial control and emboldening the Indonesian independence movement. The Japanese occupation had a profound psychological impact on Indonesia. The swift defeat of the Dutch, once seen as invincible, shattered the myth of colonial invincibility. It created a power vacuum that Indonesian nationalists were poised to fill. The struggle for independence, a nation forged. With the defeat of Japan in 1945, Indonesia declared its independence, marking the beginning of a bloody struggle for recognition. Sukarno and his fellow nationalists refused to allow the Dutch to simply reassert their colonial authority. The Indonesian people, having tasted freedom, were prepared to fight for their right to self-determination. The Indonesian National Revolution, as it became known, was a complex and multifaceted conflict. It involved guerrilla warfare, diplomacy, and international pressure. The Dutch, determined to hold on to their colony, met Indonesian resistance with force. However, the tide of history had turned against them. Indonesia's legacy, reflections on a colonial past. After years of struggle and international pressure, the Netherlands finally recognized Indonesia's independence on December 27, 1949. This marked the end of over 3 centuries of Dutch colonial rule. The legacy of Dutch colonialism in Indonesia is complex and multifaceted. It is a story of exploitation and oppression, but also of cultural exchange and the emergence of a new nation. The Dutch East Indies, once a jewel in the crown of the Dutch Empire, was no more. In its place stood Indonesia, a newly independent nation determined to chart its own course in the world. The road to independence was long and arduous, paved with the sacrifices of countless Indonesians who fought for their right to self-determination. Today, Indonesia stands as the world's largest Muslim-majority country. It is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of the human desire for freedom.